Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to Cave of the Cross Apologetics. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Tony.
And we are now in a series, because we have more than one, of Interview with a Pastor.
How about that?
And just like our last interview with our pastor, Pastor Brett Laird, we pulled in one of my good friends, Pastor Justin McCoy. And let me just get his little bio in, and we'll tell you why we're talking to him. So Justin McCoy has first joined Calvary on an intern basis. That's our church in February 2011, and now serves as our high school and young adult pastor. He has a Bachelor's of Arts in Pre-Seminary in Cedarville University and Master of Arts in Theological Studies and Masters of Religious Education from Liberty Theological Seminary, as well as a Master's of Divinity, also from Liberty. Justin and his wife, Katie, have two children, Haddon and Mariah.
Yeah. Actually, I think his title, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, is Next Generation Pastor. Is that the real title?
That's true. That means the website is several years.
Only you knew someone who had access to that website. Hold on, I'll be right back. Well, Justin, thank you for joining us. So we appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
And so, yes, one of the reasons why we did want to talk to you, because you are involved in the next generation. And of course, that's my third favorite Star Trek, is the Next Generation. And that's the accurate one for everyone to maintain. But we want to talk about apologetics and your relationship as a pastor to kids. What am I okay to call them? I never liked being called a kid, but I also never liked being called anywhere close to an adult when I was their age. So what's the cool term?
Yeah. So from what we use to be safe is from fifth grade down. We say kids, we say children. When they get into middle school, we call them students. They're still kids, but students is accurate, and they're not adults. It's kind of a way to classify them without offending them.
Okay.
Students. Yeah.
Great. So first, we just kind of want to talk a little bit about you, about your perspective coming into the role. Coming from your naming of your first child, Haddon, you seem to be a fan of Charles Haddon Spurgeon. And so Spurgeon wrote a book about, lectures to my students, and in there, and John MacArthur has also echoed these things of, if you can think of yourself doing any other thing other than ministry, you probably should do it. So why did you put away the astronaut, the firefighter, the garbage collector to be a pastor?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. No, I was hesitant. Honestly, I kind of resisted going into ministry, and for going into college even, I was in like a dual track between business and youth ministry. And then as I began to actually serve, it wasn't so much the courses in college as it was the getting involved in the church, seeing the need for biblical education, the need for and for care, the need for shepherding, the need for just guidance and direction, and just that there was this hole in the church that often the fun people went to, the fun adults would kind of go, or the ones that weren't responsible enough to do other things, and youth ministry wasn't always taken seriously. And so I kind of grew a heart for teaching the Bible and caring for youth, and that just kind of came through church involvement. It developed, and now whether it's youth or adults, I love. I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else.
Well, I always appreciated our time together. You've been there helping me read books, so you're part of the downfall of me into even more books and more reading. So I always appreciated that. So yes, Justin is a good friend in my eyes here.
Yeah, me too. So Justin, you kind of enumerated some of the things that you are doing, but could you kind of go into a little bit more detail in terms of your role as the Next Generation Pastor? What kind of things do you do, I guess? And we're going to eventually get to apologetics, so keep that in the back, in your pocket there.
Sure. So my role is a multifaceted role. I have the great opportunity to be able to work with from birth through about 18 years of age, and I spend most of my time with high school students as far as the teaching, as far as actually being with the individuals in that age group. But I do also get to have an impact in kind of from a distance oversee middle school and children as well. What that looks like in a practical sense is trying to make sure that what's being taught from the children's ministry through the high school is consistent, making sure that it builds on itself. So it's not just a haphazard, we're teaching the same thing 20 times and we're forgetting big parts of the Bible or something like that. So we want to actually have a strategic plan from as far as if a student were to go through Calvary from the nursery all the way through graduation. We have an idea of, we can say that we've taught them what they need to know to survive after high school, but also a foundation to continue to study on their own. So it's kind of connecting the pieces, unifying the pieces, and hopefully there's a strategy that is effectively assisting the parents in making disciples. That's the goal, at least. Whether we're doing that or not, I guess, is we'll see. But that's the goal.
So as far as metric goes, you kind of have to have a more forward in the thinking future to that.
Yeah, we are. I mean, our whole program is designed to launch them, and we're not. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly. Say that one more time.
So just as far as how you determine effectiveness, is it just we did our best and send them out into the world like eagles from the nest where they either flight or fall?
The metric is hard. I will say, actually having a metrics system that is because we're working with hearts, we're working with souls, and what seems like success maybe in a middle school, they're tracking, they're learning, they're growing, they're attending, and then high school years are terrible, but by 30 they're thriving, they're back on track. It's difficult to. So we're really, our goal is to be faithful to do what the Lord has called us to do, and teaching the Word of God. Hopefully that they know Him, that they're growing in Christ, and that they're going in the power of the Holy Spirit to serve the church and reach the world.
One of the books that I found beneficial that you and I read through, and then there was a part 2 to it, was Charles and the Vine. Mm-hmm. And I always like that idea of a structure in place to help the vine grow in whatever way the vine decides to, but having kind of the system in place that isn't entirely rigid, where you couldn't, maneuver pieces or change things up a little bit, but you still had some idea of a plan. It wasn't just, not that it's always a bad thing, but, we're just going to leave this up to the Holy Spirit and we'll figure things out as we go along. So.
As soon as you said metrics, I knew you were referencing back to.
It's such a good book. I really appreciate it. So kind of going back to you and kind of how people should who want to get into pastorship. Seminary is kind of the way to go. There's no road to Damascus where you're taken away as a blind person and fed for 3 years, and then you are discovered by the apostles anymore. But your seminary visits have been closer. So you did your pre-seminary, then you had a seminary point. You were hired, and now you're going back a little bit. What has been either some of the changes that you've seen from maybe some of the stories that you heard from older pastors, or what have you seen that has changed or should be encouraging to people going into seminary study, or is it fearful and the American church should disavow all major seminaries out there and we should go underground? Out of those 3.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big proponent of seminary. I enjoy education. I enjoy structured learning. And so I think seminary will always be beneficial for providing a form of organized learning. I enjoy from Liberty. It's accessible both through online and through the fact that it is a lower cost. And so that's been a big factor for me, and just where I'm my personal selections in seminary. But with that, it's what some have called like the Walmartization of seminary. The quality maybe isn't at the level either that it used to be, or at some in-person learning is still, as I think we're seeing after COVID, in-person learning is effective. It is valuable, and so the accessibility, the affordability is great. But with that, as things become more accessible, more affordable, the quality has diminished. And with that, I think there's not so much from the professor side of things, but the quality of the discussion that's allotted for virtual learning, which has been most of my education post-college, and the variety of people coming from looking for a degree that don't necessarily align with the doctrinal statement of the school, or they don't know they don't align because they were accepted and perhaps didn't read the doctrine. I don't know how they got there necessarily, but there's a variety. There's quite a variety of people that I have had classes with that I would never, I would be surprised if we were in the same church.
Mm-hmm. So the standards for getting in then are you would suggest, have lowered over the years that you've been going to seminary. Is that what I hear you saying?
I think so, and I don't want to be too critical and too judgmental of other classmates, but it appears as though the standard has, and even I will say and maybe it's my time in seminary being longer, maybe I'm getting better. My papers are getting better, but it seems like it's easier to get better grades than it has been earlier. That could very well be that I'm just growing, and that theoretically that should happen. But it seems like it's become a little easier than it has been as well.
Well, and if you think of just the history of where universities originated from, they were only there for the learned pastors of the time, and it wasn't until the inclusion of us lower people that we definitely dropped the bar and where our Ivy League colleges originated from, and so it just seems to be that next we're going to have seminaries for probably middle schoolers and stuff like that.
It's you're probably right. I've got it's not unusual to have a freshman in high school in our church that is also taking college classes, and I think that that's not quite seminary, but it's along the same lines of what you're talking about.
So as far as focus within the classes, are they still teaching the Trinity, or are they making us accept women pastors and we're all to wear different colored bracelets to inform what our gender pronouns are?
No, I've not experienced, thankfully, anything that has that I from the teaching side of things that I have wholeheartedly disagreed with. There's been times where I've taken maybe a different stance on maybe secondary, tertiary issues, but never on like the Trinity. I'm still confident that the fundamentals, the core principles, and even from like a lot of the seminaries that are out there that are the Baptist distinctives are still pretty strong, sometimes stronger than maybe the other distinctives. But I do think there are they're sticking to the word for the most part.
That's good.
So let's kind of switch gears here and talk about the students that you're working with. Okay. So what's going on with the students these days? Do you see different struggles, areas, of concern that, that's growing or what's going on with students these days? Yeah.
In some ways students there's aspects where it's always the same. If 20 years can go by, 30 years, and, students have a lot of the same struggles as perhaps we had when we were students. At the same time, one of the biggest differences I've seen in the last 2-3 years is a growing interest in politics. And my first, and that's probably trickles down from their parents, and it's right now we're living an issue that I think everyone is just kind of in it, whether they want to be or not. And so I've never, in my first 8 to 10 years of ministry, I would expect the average student wouldn't know. A politician wouldn't know who their governor is, wouldn't know, they just wouldn't care. And in the last couple of years, there's been a growing just interest of students in political issues and politicians. That's not obviously the only thing, but that's one of the key differences I've seen just in the last couple of years that I haven't seen in previous years.
What from seminary has been kind of the most beneficial that you've brought over to your teaching? And then what do you think there are some areas where there needs to be either better preparation for, or maybe at least a conversation on temping expectations down?
So the best thing from college or seminary that has impacted my ministry, was that?
Right.
Yeah, that's a great, man, that's a really good question. I think, and this is probably not and as far as an answer goes, this is not very specific, but something about just seminary has forced me to keep studying and to realize that even the first view that you come across isn't the only view. When I grew up going to church and kind of my Bible training from my parents from church, really up until college and even a little bit in college, the first view I heard was the view, and that was the only view. And then you start hearing multiple perspectives, and you realize the first time I heard that there was multiple views on hell, or that there's multiple views on sanctification, and then you start to think like it just changes your study when you're teaching, that you're not just teaching. You want to teach the correct view, or at least your understanding of what you believe to be the correct view is while you're teaching. But it's also helpful then to give students, to help them be aware there are other views out here. So when they hear that, they're not like, well, they don't assume that I've never heard of it, or that because so I would prefer to introduce students to some of the other views while I'm teaching what I believe to be the correct view, rather than just wait till they figure it out on their own. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. In fact, I think either the time before or the time before that I last taught the college class, I asked the college group if they knew who Bart Ehrman was. None of them knew who Bart Ehrman was. The two or three people that always talk to me about all the really juicy details, where I'm like, hold on, I'll get back to you next week. And then, oh yeah, I knew what you were talking about the whole time. And so I think providing even the counterpoint to our faith positions is really good, because there's a verse in 1 John that shouldn't be there. Who knew about this? Why isn't it's in the bottom of our Bible? There's a note to it. Is there an explanation to it? Having that answer available, or again teaching our kids that, hey, the simple 2-year-old answer of Jesus is only going to get you so far. It's a good answer, but it won't only get you so far.
The Sunday school answer.
Yeah. Sunday school answer.
What you learn in Sunday school today? Yeah. Oh, I learned about Jesus. Yeah. All right.
And sometimes if you're dealing with kids, that's the best you can come up with. And I will recommend. There's a great series from Zondervan called the Counterpoint series, where they get a collection of authors that they write towards an answer, and they all come from a different perspective. And Tony and I have done 5 views of apologetics, or the 5 views of Christian philosophy. There's one on hell, women ministers, the longer ending of Mark. There's all these ones. IVP, I believe, has also a counterpoint, alternate views one, and we'll include some of those links in the description of the show. So that way people have that access. So how about what would you have wanted to focus on more in school? You wanted more Greek, right? More Greek and Hebrew?
No, I wanted just enough of that to meet the bare minimum necessary. More, I would have enjoyed more more apologetics classes. And I'm not just saying that because you're having me on here today.
Oh, shucks. You're speaking our language now.
I find that particularly with youth, because it's the age where I think a lot of people have questions, they have doubts in for their personal faith. Students, the high school age, especially in college age, is where they're actually verbalizing them. And in some cases, it's the prime time to either address those questions, or they might just abandon church, kind of walk away altogether. And so it's not that they're the only group of people that are asking questions, but they're the ones that I think they're more likely to actually say and that they don't believe, or that they're struggling with something. And I find that I think of children's ministry through middle school. It's a lot of teaching them what to believe. And then as you get to high school and college, you're starting to kind of get into why we believe this, and then how it stacks up against other faiths. So you want to give them that foundation early on, but realizing that's a big part of the high school and college age. I wish I would have taken or had the opportunity to take more apologetics style courses.
Yeah. So you see those types of issues are more important to the student, or do you see that it's more important that they learn those things? In other words, are they aware that they need to know those things, and so they want to, or are you aware that they need to know them whether they're not, and so you want to make sure that they do? You understand what I'm saying there?
I think so. I think I think I'd answer yes.
Good, because that's a great answer.
I'd say there's a number of students, and unfortunately, even the students I know, they come regularly. I don't know which ones they personally need. Not to necessarily be trained in apologetics, but to hear an apologetic style teaching and explanation to strengthen their own faith, because maybe they're doubting. So there's the aspect of apologetics and youth ministry that really gives confidence to the individual student that they have questions. But there are some that they're thriving. They're not struggling. They're not necessarily, we all could grow in our faith. I want to be careful how I word that, but for them, it gives them the clarity to be able to engage in conversations with other people. And so then it's giving them tools. It's not just helping them personally, but it's also giving them tools to interact with those around them. And at Calvary, we have a mixed bag of students as far as some of them, they've got very minimal interaction with people from different religions, different worldviews. But for the ones they do, they're fully and they're fully in it. And so they are constantly hearing different perspectives, and they're craving the tools and the training to be able to engage not just in conversation, but also the culture. Because like I said, they have the interest in politics and things. And so they're thinking about social issues in a way that just students haven't, I think, before.
Yeah. So our kids then, students. Our students are the learned students who are very mature for their age. Are they then asking the questions and not finding an avenue to look for the answer, or are they kind of coming to you for it, or are they looking for maybe some podcasts, like this one little one out of your church that operates, or are they kind of aware of where to go other than not other than, but what direction are they taking for finding those answers, or are they just asking amongst their peer group and hoping that someone has an answer?
I think, unfortunately, you got a mixture of everything. I think there's a lot of students, and they're kind of a little bit of our culture today, that there's an acceptance of other people's beliefs and worldviews with that, even if they're contradictory they don't agree with your own. They don't stop and wrestle with it and realize that they both can't be true. So there is a politeness and a certain level of acceptance, unfortunately, among some students, that they are like, okay, that's good for you, but not for me. And obviously we don't. We want to encourage them to actually engage, to push back a little bit, to ask some questions. Like I think of is it Kukul that talks about putting a pebble in their shoe? Once maybe they don't know all the answers, but they hopefully gets them to think about their belief system. So some just they just know there's these competing worldviews, and they just they believe what they believe and they don't necessarily engage. So there's some who, it's the most compelling argument at the time wins. And that's a scary thing for students is, if or the majority. So like if maybe they have a really convincing friend or they have a lot of friends, that can be winsome, especially if they've never heard this alternative view and they just assume that, wow, my pastor never talked about this. He probably doesn't know either. And so there's there's a lot of different reactions, I guess, and responses. We hope that we want them to know that the Bible has an answer to their questions. And even if they don't know, part of what we want to instill early on is that even if you don't know the answer, the Bible does have the answer, and you can look for it and you can come back to it.
Including being careful about accepting the first answer that you hear.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And we'll include a link to our interview with Greg Kokel below, so you can click on that as well and watch us talk to the Greg Kokel, which was pretty cool. So then, for how you prepare to answer, is it? Do you find yourself kind of sitting down and having one-on-one discussions, or is it once it hits a crescendo of I've heard three people kind of talk about it, I'm going to preach on it, or how are you? How best do you find it addressed? Is it more one-on-one time, or is it kind of in the lecture setting?
Yeah, and again, all of the above. Yeah. I think so. We just kind of how we operate. Our senior small group, we have small groups by grades. It's a year that's completely dedicated to apologetics, and so we have one avenue where we want to prepare them for college. It's the final year, so that's a kind of a year-long exposure there to those questions. From me teaching on Sunday mornings, I go a variety of. Sometimes this has become a big issue, and so I'm gonna address this, and it's important to address. I'm getting a lot of questions. Sometimes just like a couple months ago, I did a series just a 1 week overview on Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Christian Science, and just kind of here's where they disagree, and then or where we disagree from them, and then how do you start a conversation? How would you what key doctrines is it helpful to know if you meet somebody like this, because obviously the whole Bible, it's helpful to know all of it, but what are the key points of where we differ? And so sometimes I'll hit something like that. Sometimes it's a couple years ago, we looked at different worldviews with like Marxism to Islam and atheism, just kind of hit some from a worldview perspective, sometimes like I guess you might call it cults. And so we've done it different. So sometimes it comes up in teaching series. Of course, I want every student to know anytime they have a question, they can come to me directly. And there is a number of personal conversations I have with students. And but if I get a number of those, I want to teach on it, because if a few people actually come to me, it's probably because a lot of them are having that same thought.
Yeah. And that's why you have a line item for just coffee, because that's
right.
Yeah.
That is absolutely right.
Let me ask you this question. You tend to go on a good number of short-term missionary trips and get students out there. You like going to Chicago is one that you tend to send people to, that you give them training in sharing their faith, and then they go out. Do you find people, the students, come back to that with kind of a culture shock, even and both within America, and then if you do take them overseas, or do you see that type of oh wow, people live way different than us, even if it's a short distance away?
Absolutely, I think that's one of the short-term mission trips have some different goals than long-term missions, and one of the benefits of short-term mission trips is just exposure. Just seeing that your world that you have here in for them Kalamazoo, Portage, or whatever is different than the other parts of the world, and God is still working, and God is still moving in other parts of the world, and that exposure then shows both a combination of how, in a lot of cases, how well they really have it, and also in a world that needs Jesus. And so some of our students, they spend the majority of their time with people who already have a relationship with Christ. And so just that exposure not only to sometimes poverty, but also to spiritual poverty to those, just need to hear the gospel.
Yeah. So you have a trip coming up here this summer, I think. Is that correct?
We have two. So we're taking a group of 26 to St. Louis, and then 19 of us are heading to Panama. A combination of really, both meeting physical needs and spiritual needs. Both situations, both areas, we're going to be dealing with people who are probably the exposure factor that you mentioned is going to be quite significant, I think. Yeah.
There's a kind of a philosophical debate where it's imagine yourself as a bat, and it's hard to do that because all you're doing is just imagining you in a bat, and so it's this idea of you can't actually get in there. But when I took just a normal trip to Costa Rica for half a month and just and lived there for that period of time, it was a culture shock knowing that I was going to a place called Costa Rica that I did all this extensive research on of what sites to hit and stuff, and it's just like, oh wow, the church can thrive here. So when I'm thinking of the early church, having kind of that semblance in mind too of okay, these people at least have 3 days of money to buy their daily bread. Now half that and half that again, and you have the early church who are slaves who are working for daily bread and also hearing the gospel, moving away from their center point of the Jewish faith, or they're moving away from the pagan aspect. It was a neat experience that grabbed me when I was there for 14 days, and I wasn't even doing missionary work. I was just saying, oh, here's a little church on the side of the road. There are Christians that go here. That's kind of neat. Yeah. So
do you have different goals with regard to the two trips? What are you trying to accomplish? Or is it the same? Or
I mean, the overarching, I think we have a general goals for all of our trips, right? We want to not only expose them to a new culture, a new place, but also hopefully expose them to the need for missions. So more important than any tasks that we accomplish while we're there, whether we don't want to, whether we're feeding the poor or whether we're building something. The reality is somebody else could probably do that, probably better than us, and probably cheaper if we were to just give money rather than take a whole team. One of the goals probably the key goal is by exposing them to another culture, to missions in general, is that we have students who are committed to missions as they grow. So whether that means they go on more short-term trips or whether they start giving to long-term missionaries, whether they begin praying for those missionaries, again, getting them outside of their world and hopefully seeing just the significance and importance of those trips. Now, if it's an English-speaking country, or if we're in country like St. Louis, the gospel, we prepare them to share the gospel. We want them to be able to be ready. In fact, that's part of our meetings ahead of time. Obviously, if we're going international, that goal changes a little bit because of the language barrier. But a lot of times we do have opportunities to share testimonies, to share a lesson that's translated, and even more so being able to share the gospel, because they have to, when it's being translated, they really have to think through their words if somebody's translating, going through the work of trying to put it into the language. So yeah, I mean, the gospel it tends to actually be more front and center from our students on the domestic trips. However, we want to do everything we can to increase the local missionaries' ability to serve after we're gone. So on the international trips, if we can help them strengthen the relationship so they can get the gospel out, then by meeting a physical need, then that's part of the goal. So not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And we might make note of the significant percentage of the folks who are from our church that have gone on to overseas mission. I mean, it seems like for a while every year somebody was leaving the church to go on to overseas mission, right? So I would think that's part of the deal, right? They were exposed as younger adults or whatever, and so that helped kind of feed the flames there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I see mission trips as like greenhouses of spiritual growth, where they're a lot of times they're reading the Bible every day. They're praying every day. They're with other believers, serving the Lord, witnessing. They're all the things the Lord calls us to do. They're doing it for a short period of time. And it's not a mystery that they're growing on these trips. So not only, they're wondering, like, I don't know why I grew so much in that 1 week. Well, it's, if you did those things at home for a week, you'd probably grow too. So there's, but not only is it the long-term effects, but we do find that just a week where students are cut off from the world, or at least from the distractions of usually their phones and things like that, it's helpful for their own personal growth. So again, not why someone goes into long-term missions isn't for their own personal growth necessarily, but short-term mission trips have a different metric than long-term missions as far as evaluating success.
Okay. This next question, I want you to speak to 3 different types of people, and I'll give you all of them, and we'll head back through all of them. And so if you need us to remove your video so that you can be even more forthcoming, this is what, I'm the editor, so you can do that. So we want you to speak to these types of people, whether it be in church or those who interact with students. So their parents or people that will eventually become parents for their age range that you monitor, those who want to mentor and work with kids, and those in the church who have no clue what to do with kids whatsoever. So what do you want parents or soon to be parents to know what to do, or train their kids better so that they're not so rambunctious in church somehow? I'm going to tell you, I have no clue right now. So, but what would you want to let parents know, and maybe an answer, and also gear it a little bit towards helping them obviously through their walk of faith.
Yeah. So for the parents or almost parents, first category, there's less than 1,000 weeks that from birth through graduation. That's less than 1,000 Saturdays that you can spend with your child, that you have opportunity to, less than 1,000 Sundays to get them in church. And I think there's a countdown that immediately starts the moment you have a child, and that where they're launched, and your window of being able to train them, your window of being able to teach them drastically decreases. That doesn't stop, but when they're launched, that countdown, Jim Elliott talked about to his own parents that arrows, children. Well, Psalm 127 talks about children are heritage of the Lord; they're like arrows, and Elliott said, "Well, what are arrows for but to be shot?" And so, if your children are arrows to be launched, then what are you doing today to prepare for their launch? And so, making the most of the time, I guess. I know that's kind of a cliche, I guess. Don't count the days, make the days count, type of a thing. But you can't expect somebody else to teach your child the Bible. I mean, yes, there's the church, but don't rely fully on others, because eventually that responsibility falls primarily on the parent.
And then as far as like a direction to take it, do you think teaching just the Bible, catechism, other perspectives? I mean, as far as maybe just where to start. I have no clue where to go other than bring them to Pastor McCoy and saying, please fix my kid. Obviously, that's not the direction that you want, but what are some kind of first steps that we can take?
First steps. I guess it depends on age. I know this will be a shameless plug. So I am I'm a tutor for Kalamazoo area tutors, and I teach a high school apologetics course for students using Summit Ministries curriculum. I'm sure you've probably heard of Summit out of Colorado, and that's not a required class. I mean, when you're in high school, for sure, that's not something that a student needs to take, but there are plenty of resources out there. That's just one of them for those who are local, that to make sure you're committing to making sure your child knows the Bible, even though it might not be the most effective thing on their resume or on their college application. right? That course is not going to help a kid get into an Ivy League school. But
hinder more than anything at this point.
It could help them survive at an Ivy League school.
There you go.
And so, and I think, and that's just one, whether it's in kind to with that, I guess first step is, I know I said you're the parents are the primary disciple makers or the primary influence, but that doesn't mean they're the only. And I think getting them into church, I think, and that means, that seems so simple, but again, a lot of times we look to sports and other things. Church is what we do when we're not doing anything else. And so committed to church these days is really, it's a commitment to be there when other things aren't scheduled on Sunday. And I'd say to change that a little bit. And step one is commit to teaching them yourself, commit to putting them in positions where other people could teach them would be step two.
So work.
It's work.
Yeah. You brought them into this world. Have them go through it well. Yeah. How about those who want to mentor or work with students, but don't quite know what to do yet? They've either have a passion for it, or they think they have a passion for it.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of exploring, and when it comes to ministry, experimenting. And so I think some people kind of like looking for God's will, they get so trapped and burdened by trying to figure out the exact right thing to do that they do nothing. And so if someone was at Calvary, for instance, and they're interested in helping with the high school, I'd say, well, why don't you just come for a week and look at what we do? And usually a person feels like a fish out of water if they're not interested in student ministry, or they're just terrified, and then they know right away, like, this is not something I'm interested in doing. Other people are like, this is hard, but I'm up for the challenge. And so then we take steps, at least at our church, there's a number of steps to get involved. Sometimes, though, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a church setting. I think if someone has passion for youth, it's possible there's already some students and youth in their life that in a very informal way could begin a relationship. And with students, is if there's a relationship with their parents, obviously, and it's in a, it's not in a weird way, but just, taking a student out to coffee, taking them to lunch. I mean, students, young adults, they love free food. It's a great window. If you want to speak truth into their life.
A lot of people love free food.
You can offer free food. You have a window to talk to them. But yeah, I'd say start with the relationships that are already in front of you, and then go from there.
Two books that I want to recommend here that were instrumental in my understanding of this. One is Howard Hendricks' Iron Sharpens Iron. And that takes it from both someone who wants a mentor and also the person that wants to mentor. That book, I wasn't expecting anything other than, oh, this looks like an interesting book. And I read all of Howard Hendricks' stuff, so much so that I knew all his jokes when he was writing what they were going to be, because I read his entire plethora of body of work. And then one that I recently just got done reading by Diane Glyer called Bandersnatch, and it's about the Inklings. It's the group that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien met and just had a writing group. And in there, it's a history one as well, but it also kind of has points of like, okay, if you want to start a group like this, what are some of the elements that you can see benefit from? And so it's like just having a critique, but openness. And so, have people that can bring questions, and then have it be kind of an open platform, and then let people be wrong, let people put out, either in a writing situation or just in a small group. And so she has elements of there. And I really got a lot out of that book for kind of, okay, I kind of want to meet with people, but what does that look like? Instead of just sitting around going, all right, so what do we want to do? It's just kind of like, all right, here's what we're doing. If we don't like it, we can always change. That's the great thing about it. It's like just the delaying the expectations of success kind of deal.
Absolutely. It's good.
And then how about people in the church, or maybe outside the immediate church, who have no clue what to do with students, but they don't know if they're called, or they've never even thought in their mind of what to do with these people running around them. They're just so different.
I would say start with prayer, and maybe end there too. But But no matter what age a person is in the church, I think there's great value in just praying for those, especially the different generations. So I would say the same thing for the youth, to be praying for our older saints in the church. And I think that helps build a relationship. One, if you want to pray more specifically, you have to build a relationship or get to know them a little bit. But you appreciate some of the struggles they're going through, some of the things they're dealing with, and that allows for because no matter whether if you're 80 years old and you can pray, right? If you're 16, you can pray for an 8-year-old can pray for a 16-year-old. You don't have to be called for that. That's just part of being the church. So as you're praying, then you start, sometimes prayer is a gateway to you're checking in though. So if there's an older gentleman in our church, an example here, he weekly emails me and asks how he could be praying for me. And so I send him back every week an email, and our relationship, right, even though that's the bulk of it, he's not actively involved in youth ministry, but he's praying probably more for the youth ministry than a lot of people in our church. And yet he's never steps a foot in our youth room. So, and that's the way, so by praying for me, he's praying for the youth. And I think that's, I'm rambling all over here, but that's the key way I would say to get plugged in.
Mm-hmm. That's also, I think too, thinking that you don't have anything to offer because, I don't have that passion, just talking to somebody who's built a business before, or, everyone loves to hear police stories and firefighter stories. So, think of, who could benefit from that, or, sponsoring kids for camps or youth groups, something like that, getting involved in that way. I think also, if not a close relationship aspect to it, but still supporting part of the church, right? The kids are just as much as part of the church as the oldest member, right?
Yeah. So what? And we probably need to wrap this up here.
Justin's on his day off. We can keep him. It's fine.
But let's just end up with talking about apologetics. What do you see as the future of apologetics in the church?
I think it's gonna. I don't know if I'd call it on the peripheral aspect of the church right now, but it certainly won't be in the future. I think as we get further and further, the need for not only being able to give answers, not only be able to give a defense. And I think apologetics, as it covers a lot of different areas and using the word on a broad term, not just having like debates and high level thinking type of apologetics, but just being able to engage our world and explain why we do and don't do certain things. Where I think apologetics for morality is becoming a bigger deal. Explaining why, sometimes we think of apologetics between key worldviews and different religions, but sometimes just having a defense for why, as Christians, you don't abortion or gender, or and so a little bit getting more into a defense for just morals is a kind of a shift, I think, in some of the bent of apologetics that's becoming more prominent and probably will be as we move forward.
Well, you're in good company because Andreas Kostenberger, who we interviewed recently, pretty much said kind of the same thing. So, good job. That's the right answer then.
That's so good. He had my answer.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. What going forward can we focus on as individuals of what's the best kind of not apologetic approach, but as far as I guess being open, because as you mentioned, I almost see it as a benefit. The 1950s had this idea of I'm an American, therefore I'm a Christian, and so you had a prevalence of just moderate Christians or those that came for the for the potlucks, and so now you have more the decline of Christianity. Should we be more concerned with, I guess, as a church as a whole, having having answers that as you said, speak to morality. Is there still a benefit for having a broader aspect on the outlook of apologetics?
Oh, absolutely. I think my own personal just bent is that if any type of head knowledge that we have in apologetics should, if it's not applied, if someone has all the answers, but they're not talking to anybody, and they're not interacting with people, I'm not sure. I hope the future of apologetics is such that all the answers then lead to conversation and cultural engagement. Because if the church is really good at apologetics, but we only talk about it within the church, I do think there's the personal confidence aspect that I talked about earlier, that students can strengthen their own personal faith, knowing that there are answers to their questions. But I hope the more we study and the more we come to those and develop answers, we're actually providing those answers to the watching world. Or otherwise, I think the church will be very ineffective if our apologetics is limited to within internal church discussion.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons why we're just not handed a list of rules in book form. We're given people's lives. We're told what happened. We see an active version of faith, and that goes not only for how to treat husbands as wives, but also how we interact with who God is, who He's revealed Himself to be, and also providing answers so that it's supremely beneficial for anything that we do, including things like politics, how to raise children. All that stuff is what the Christian worldview talks to. So great. Thank you, Justin, for giving us your day off and coming on and talking about apologetics with us as far as it concerns students.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope that you're able to edit out all of the stuff that's bad. And
Right. And that'll be the clip show where we put as the highlight. Yeah.
All good.
Great. Well, thanks again, Justin. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.